What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Toma Todito Show. And Canelo Alvarez is a story of tonight. Canelo Alvarez set his goals, set his mind to unifying the super middleweight division and becoming the undisputed champion at 168, and has accomplished it. He defeated Caleb Plant, stopped Caleb Plant in the 11th round, and it was a scene to behold. To be there live must have been a hell of an experience. Just watching it on pay-per-view was a hell of an experience. I could only imagine what people witnessed and what the feeling was, what the adrenaline, the feeling overall of the crowd, how in tune they were. Of course, it was a majority crowd for Canelo, majority of the fans there in attendance, but it was a great night of boxing. And should Caleb Plant would he have pulled it off, it would have been the same. The crowd possibly would have been quiet. They would have been shut down with the celebration of the few overshadowing the majority of the crowd that night if Caleb Plant would have been successful. Great fight by Caleb Plant. Great showing. And if you look at the preview episode leading up to this fight, in my opinion, as I had rated the champions that Canelo was going through, I considered, and I will stand by it, even watching this recent performance of Caleb Plant, I honestly believe that Billy Joe Saunders was the hardest test for Canelo Alvarez out of all the champions that were available for him to face. I think BJ Saunders was number one. I think Callum Smith was set out to be number two of the toughest, but almost in a tie with Caleb Plant. Rocky Fielding, of course, was the weakest of the champions available. And then you got everybody else. Would or should David Benavidez, if he would have been a champion that Canelo would have faced or have needed to face, that would have been the toughest test. Of the available opponents, David Benavidez is hands down number one at the moment. You got your up-and-comers like Edgar Berlanga. You got someone who's holding the regular version of the WBA title, 5-0, Cuban prospect and Cuban fighter, I guess, champion now. No longer a prospect, as the WBA moved him up. This is the WBA's version of Gennady Golovkin at 168 and PBC's version of Gennady Golovkin. And they pushed him into a title. He's 5-0. That's Osvari David Morrell. And he's got the WBA version, the regular version to that title. There's another title that is out there lingering. It's not one of the four major sanctioning bodies, but it's recognized by sports writers, is recognized within the boxing circles, but it's not one of the major four sanctioning bodies that determines an undisputed champion. Yet the title has changed hands. We saw it recently as Usyk dethroned Joshua, and we see it here. This title did not play part in this undisputed match, and that is the IBO title. The IBO title right now belongs to Ecuadorian fighter Gongora, and he's the IBO champ at the moment. David Morrell has a regular version to the WBA. Fedor Chuvinov, I believe Fedor Chuvinov has, the Russian fighter, he has the WBA version, the gold version to the WBA title. But other than that, the man who holds the Ring Magazine title, and that title seems to be, whoever holds that title seems to be the man who is recognized as the man to beat in that division, in said division. Canelo Alvarez is the Ring Magazine champion, the recognized undisputed champion, and has unified all four of the sanctioning body titles, 5 altogether, considering that Ring title, right? 5 titles altogether around his shoulders. his waist, and he has attained and accomplished the goal that he set out to see through, dating back to 2018. If we take a look back, let's dive into the fight a little bit, and then let's take a look back at where this whole journey began. As we look at the fight, the way that it was playing out, I was scoring the fight. I didn't want to because I really wanted to focus on the fight. But I did keep score of the fight. And of course, Canelo is known to start slow. Canelo is, and that seems to be the story for him, at least ever since he joined the 168. Before 168, he used to have problems gassing out, usually around the 4th, 5th round, or after the 4th round. He would start slowing down because he would gas out. His stamina is something that he's worked on. The Reynoso team has really worked on, and they've turned that around where he no longer gasses out. As I was scoring the fight, and I'll give you the fight, the final score that I had for this fight was, let's take it round by round. Round 1, I had Caleb Plant win that round. I had him win round 2. I had him win round 8 and round 9. As close as those rounds were, I thought Caleb Plant had done enough to get himself back in the fight, those being the last 2 rounds. And round 9 was really questionable for me. Round 8 was another one that I was on the fence. But I wanted to recognize Caleb Plant for the work that he was doing. He managed to utilize the ring very well. His footwork was good. He was still on point, even though he was starting to wear down and tire out a little bit. He still managed to get that jab, initiate his attack by way of the jab, get his spacing, and he was frustrating Canelo, where you would see Canelo go back to his corner, retrieve to his corner, frustrated. And the corner kept calming him down, telling him, hey, it's coming back. Eddie Reynoso, of course, masterful, is always telling him, it's coming. Just be patient. Stop rushing it, because he was rushing a lot of the punches, throwing really, really heavy punches that could tend to gas a fighter out eventually, because they could punch themselves out and start tiring. Canelo was throwing with everything. He threw bombs the entire way. So those are the rounds that I gave Plant: 1, 2, 8, and 9. And the rest were for Canelo. So with that said, the 11th round was something to behold, because I didn't see it ending that way. At the end of the 10th round, Canelo ended up landing some big punches. By the 11th round, when he started, the corner's telling him to go after him. And the sense of urgency to begin the championship rounds, the sense of urgency on Canelo was, it's almost like you could sense it. He needed to turn that up. A lot of people are saying that Canelo gets stronger in the later portion of the fight. I don't see it that way. I see Canelo actually being very consistent, very steady throughout the fight now, where his pressure is very consistent and at a consistent rate. He's not wavy anymore. He's not going up and down. He's not taking some rounds off because he's gassing, so forth. He usually starts slow because he likes to analyze his fighters. He's starting to do something like Mayweather used to do, something like Oscar De La Hoya used to do, where he would analyze the fighters during the fight. As he's getting attacked, he would try different things. He would approach the ropes and let Caleb bring the fight to him. He would press on Caleb and try to take the action to him and see what punches he's getting countered with. That's what was frustrating him, that Caleb Plant's speed was awesome that night. Caleb Plant displayed good speed, good overall mix-up of punches. As he kept Canelo guessing, he would tap him in the body and then come back with an uppercut. Hit him with a hook and then hit him with a jab and follow it up with another hook on the same hand. And he would have 2 body shots. 2 hooks to the body, and then follow it up with a left. And it'd be 2 right-hand hooks to the body, get Canelo to drop his guard a little bit, and then send a left jab to Canelo before he moved out of the way. It was that type of performance by Caleb Plant where he mixed up his attack. A lot of it was more, if you could tell during the rounds, and if you rewatch the fight, a lot of it was pitter-patter, almost a Joe Calzaghe style pitter-patter, versus everything being delivered with power like Canelo was. Canelo everything he threw, there was power behind it, and eventually it started taking a toll on Caleb Plant, something that you didn't think you would see, but it started taking a toll on Caleb Plant. So awesome performance by both fighters. I still stand behind, out of the 4 champions that Canelo faced and dethroned, that Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant, if they ever step into the ring, I think Billy Joe Saunders would beat Caleb Plant. I know a lot of people dispute that with me, but if you look at the styles of fights, both of them would be boxing. It may even be a dull, boring style fight because they're both movers. They're both from the outside, so you won't have a lot of action. You'll have the speed in hand speed, definitely giving the nod to Caleb Plant, but you'll have the better boxing, I believe, at least the trickier style on behalf of Billy Joe Saunders, where he mixes up his attack. He definitely delivers less than Caleb Plant, but he delivers a little bit more power and varies his attack a little bit better than that of Caleb Plant. Caleb did it on this fight. The fight that he needed to bring, if he ever needed to put his entire repertoire together, it was on this night, and he did it. He didn't have an off night. He was just bested by a better fighter. He didn't have an off night like he did against Caleb Truex. He didn't have a performance like he did against Uzcategui. He had a better performance than that against Uzcategui. He didn't have the type of performance that he would put on against Mike Lee, where he was just going into it as the favorite and would just stop these fighters. He was very measured. He was very concise and very aware of what he wanted to do. Very aware and in tune with his game plan and with his corner, I would say, for at least the first 9 rounds, 8 rounds maybe at that. Between the 8 and 9, even though, yes, I said it, I scored those rounds for Caleb Plant. A lot of people may think I'm crazy, but go back and look at those rounds. And to me, he was actually, and I know CompuBox, I mean, they're clicking these punches on the side. A lot of times they mix punches. A lot of times you see punches as a fan that are landing and they're not counted. So take that into consideration, but mute the TV, go back and watch round 8, round 9, and let me know if you agree with Caleb Plant having done enough to have squeezed out those 2 rounds. I wasn't trying to gift anything to Caleb Plant, but I also was trying to keep an eye and keep myself honest and not being biased towards Canelo Alvarez. And just because he landed the heavier punches, he had less of an output in my eyes, but he landed the heavier punches. Therefore, he would steal the rounds automatically. And a lot of people tend to score fights that way. I tend not to. I try to give the right of way to the boxer who's actually going out there trying to maintain momentum, trying to switch momentum back to their side, trying to affect the game plan. And so it's not just a pitter patter and letting the hands go without landing anything. It's trying to mix up that attack. And he was connecting on Canelo, either by way of jabs, by small hooks, keeping him honest with the body, keeping him at bay, utilizing the ring very well. The ring generalship on Caleb Plant's behalf was great. Canelo was just out to seek and destroy, trying to cut off the ring, corner him. Eventually, those body shots took a toll on Caleb Plant, slowed down, and Canelo was able to affect his game plan. In round 10 was the setup. Round 11, he came out to just close the show. Caleb Plant's legs were gone round 11 after that first drop. And the second one, if you look at the last punch before he goes down, it was a punch right to the side, right to the kidney, just softened up Caleb Plant to where he just succumbs. His legs give out, he drops on the knee, and it was heavy punching. Even though it's up close, he's got hammers for hands, Canelo does. So very, very good fight through and through. Caleb Plant was definitely showed a very good side of him. A lot of promise. This is his first defeat of his career, so he's 21-1 now. Nothing to be ashamed of. Caleb Plant performed amazingly, and if he needed to put it together, this was the night, and he did so. He showed up. He didn't cave into the pressure like he said that most fighters were doing by the time they stepped in. He also didn't walk away with any major injuries like other fighters have. Callum Smith with his bicep, BJ Saunders with his cheekbone. Rocky Fielding just got destroyed. His ribs, his stomach just got destroyed, got taken, his legs got taken from him. He didn't belong in there. He was definitely the weaker of the champions, but he posed a threat by way of height, by way of size, by way of reach. And that was one of the big tests that Canelo, one of the first big tests that Canelo had in moving up divisions. We take a look back at where this whole journey began, and we got to take it all the way back to 2018. This is post Gennady Golovkin rematch. He gets the nod, a majority decision win over Gennady Golovkin, giving Triple G his first loss of his record. And that happened September 15th of 2018. Not even 24 hours had gone by. By Sunday, the 16th, talks had already begun. People clamoring for the third fight. The trilogy should happen in Cinco de Mayo the following year, 2019. People clamoring that Canelo's going to stay away from him. The haters, the doubters, the naysayers, everybody came after Canelo. Canelo stayed pretty quiet. The Canelo team stayed pretty quiet. And then after a week or so, they start saying, we don't need to fight Triple G a third time. And everybody loses their mind. He's ducking him. He's scared. He's this, he's that. Then the talks begin. We're going to try our hand and venture into the division north of us at super middleweight. No one's ever unified that division. There's never been an undisputed champ in that division. We want to be the first, not just the first Mexican to do so, but we want to be the first in the history of that division to do so, since the inception of that division, dating back to 23, 24 years since its existence, since it got created. If you think about what Canelo Alvarez, how many fights he spent at middleweight at 160, he only fought 3 times at middleweight. That's a crazy stat because a lot of people thought that he was running that division, and sure enough, he was. Interchangeably between him and Triple G, they were on top of that division with everybody else moving into position to challenge him, everybody else calling him out. Everybody else trying to get the payday with either of these two fighters, but their eyes were set on one another. Canelo Alvarez only fought 3 times officially at 160 pounds. When he left 154, his final fight at 154 was against Callum Smith's younger brother, Liam Smith, who he stopped in the 9th round. That was his final fight at 154, September Mexican Independence Weekend, September 17th or so it was, 2016, when he beat Liam Smith. 2016. By Cinco de Mayo weekend in 2017, he fought Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., the son of the legend, at a catchweight, and they fought at 164, not at middleweight. So technically, that was his first introduction into both of those divisions. He didn't have to cut all the way down to middleweight, but he also wasn't quite meeting the limit of super middleweight, fighting a heavier, bigger fighter. And Chavez, that was supposed to be the Mexican War of Ages. And it was a one-sided affair where Canelo just dismantled Jr. And even though he didn't knock him out, he didn't get him out of there. It was just a one-sided affair where Junior was just bested, and you could easily see that that was one of the clear examples of and you guys hear me say it a lot. There's levels to the game, and that was one of the best examples ever. Canelo Alvarez cemented himself as the best available Mexican power puncher at that time after doing that to Chavez Jr. Because Chavez Jr., although he has his problems with camps, with discipline, he's lazy. He doesn't like to see his fights through. So therefore he has to negotiate last minute weigh-ins or weight adaptations or weight adjustments. When he shows up and he steps onto the ring, people don't know what Junior they're going to see. And sometimes he gives you an action-packed fight, and sometimes he gives you a half-assed performance. And he just did so against Anderson Silva, where he was supposed to teach the MMA fighter, the legend, the older fighter, a lesson, a boxing lesson, because Anderson Silva was venturing into boxing, and Anderson Silva ended up beating him. That wasn't the beginning of the decline for Junior, but it definitely put one of the final nails in the coffin of his career. That was definitely one of the sure signs of that Junior was no longer going to be in the boxing circles for much longer. That fight was at 164. Later that year, in September of that same year in 2017, that's when Canelo and Golovkin fought for the first time. The big mega fight that everybody wanted, the big mega fight that everybody was calling for. Canelo, Golovkin get into the ring and they fight to a split decision draw. A lot of fans thought Canelo won. Majority of fans felt that Triple G won. The judges saw it as a draw, and most critics felt that it was a gift to Canelo, where he deserved that loss. 1 year later, 2018, the big rematch happens. They pick up from round 13 and they fight all the way to round 24. 24 rounds between these two. This time it was a majority decision win awarded to Canelo, and he ends up unifying the division, walking away with the WBC, the WBA, and the IBO title, which Gennady Golovkin had around his waist. He brought to the ring with. Canelo refused to pay the fee, the sanctioning body fee, so he didn't get that belt awarded to him, but he walked away with the WBC and the WBA titles, unified the 160 division, and that was one of the last times that we saw him at 160, his second official fight at 160. From there, he took that break. He didn't come back until later to close out that year as he challenged. He ventured into super middleweight, and that was his introduction to super middleweight, and that's when he defeated and dethroned Rocky Fielding, who was the newest and the least experienced champion in that division. He takes the WBA strap away from Rocky Fielding. He comes back in Cinco de Mayo of 2019. He goes back to middleweight and unifies the division once again as he faces none other than Danny Jacobs. That would be the final time that we saw Canelo at 160. 2 with Golovkin, 1 with Danny Jacobs. He ends up adding the IBF strap and has 3 of the 4 major sanctioning titles. He was 1 title away from unifying that division, and that was the WBO title. And I believe at that time, Bubu Andrade had already been crowned as a WBO champ, and asking for that fight, a fight that still hasn't happened. It may happen in the future, but it didn't happen then. And after what he pulled, Bubu Andrade pulled at the post-press conference after the BJ Saunders fight earlier this year, it doesn't look like Canelo's going to want to get in the ring with them because he feels that Andrade is just chasing the payday. So that's fighter discrepancy, fighter disdain for one another. And Canelo has the upper hand in that. That is the last time that Canelo stepped into the ring at 160 was against Danny Jacobs. 3 fights at 160 and ended up with 3 of the 4 major titles, unifying that division or close to unifying that entire division. Months later, in November of 2019, he gets into the ring against Sergey Kovalev, another fight that he took a lot of criticism for. A fight that Sergey Kovalev and his team could have turned down, but it was too much money and they were 2 months removed from their fight with Anthony Yarde, if I remember correctly, which took place in the September of that year. They just couldn't pass it up. He was fresh coming off of a fight in which he did not look very good, and he was nearly stopped by Yarde, but he ended up coming away with the victory. And he got himself right back into a training camp, not fully recovered, got himself into a ring. Of course, you're looking at a smaller fighter, a fighter that has struggled with Triple G's power. So therefore, Kovalev, the crusher in 2 divisions above him, would definitely have a field day with the smaller Mexican fighter. And he got stopped in the 11th round, and in nasty fashion too. Not only that, but Canelo ended up winning a title at 175. He took Kovalev's WBO title. From there, we would not see Canelo until December of 2020. And that's where this recent streak began. He faced Callum Smith, who walked into the ring with the Ring Magazine title and the WBC. The WBC title was vacant, and it was going to be in play for this fight. The ring title, everybody considered Callum Smith to be the biggest threat at that division at the time that they stepped into the ring, and Canelo was bringing his WBA strap that he had lifted from Rocky Fielding back in 2018. 2 years to the date of that fight that Canelo had that WBA title with him, without having to have defended it or anything. He kept Rocky Fielding's WBA title from December 15th of 2018 to December 19th of 2020, when he stepped into the ring and put it on the line against Callum Smith. Beats Callum Smith by decision, destroys his bicep. It was the fight. If you guys go back and see the recap episode that I did on that, I say it again. That fight taught me something. It was one of the first few times that I saw, or one of the rare times where I noticed that a fighter utilized his opponent's advantages and turned them into his weaknesses. The height, the strength, the reach, the style of fight, he removed everything from him and used that against Callum Smith, used it as a weakness. It became a weakness for Callum Smith. Because of Canelo's height, he was able to get into the inside, destroy his body, work him from the inside. The arms were Callum Smith's arms were going above and beyond over Canelo's head, past his body. His arms were too long to be able to connect them at close range. Canelo took advantage of it and destroyed his arm, eliminated his left arm from the fight. Then came the mandatory to that WBC title, which was Avni Yildirim, February of this year. By May, he got himself into what I still consider to be the toughest of the available champions at that time, which was Billy Joe Saunders. A great fight, a fight that I had Billy Joe Saunders up in the scorecards until he gets his orbital bone broken and busted up and stopped. He retires on a stool, and Canelo gets 3 of the 4 titles lined up and ready for Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant, of course, holding the final piece to the throne, which was the IBF strap. And what a performance that he put on. Nothing to be ashamed of. Caleb Plant, if anything, his stock went up. He gained more fans. He stood up to the favorite, which was Canelo, and he performed well. Canelo Alvarez set out to accomplish a goal that back in 2018, the hating began, the criticism began, the doubts. And it's something that's tried and true with everyday life that you could apply to your personal life, my personal life, when it happens to be something that you want to set out to accomplish, a goal that you are trying to venture towards, and people immediately start knocking you down. They burst your bubble. People will be quick to tell you, you can't do this, you're not good enough, you're not this. Well, he had to listen to it on a mass scale when he set out to accomplish this goal that he wanted to do of becoming an undisputed champion at 168 and do something for the history of boxing add his name to the history books of boxing, not just become one of the best all-time Mexican fighters, but one of the best boxers of all time. One of the best to do it. And he's right there knocking on the door to be one of the best, if not the best. He still has work to do. But he set out to accomplish a goal that since 2018, people started knocking on him for ducking a fighter, for running away, for not wanting. I mean, you heard it all, from ducking Triple G to being scared of Triple G to not wanting to fight certain fighters, ducking Charlo, ducking Boo Boo Andrade, ducking Danny Jacobs. Then he got into the ring with them and beat them. From not wanting to fight black fighters. You saw that narrative from such channels that have such a big following, like Dante's Boxing Nation, and you got Blue Blood Boxing, I think is another channel. And they constantly run off with these narratives off of an old Terrence Crawford interview. And they just ran off with it. He refuses to fight black fighters. He doesn't want them to get paid. And they ran off with this stuff. Scared of Triple G, scared of the camp. He's doping. He's this, he's that. Non-stop. And he set his mind to accomplish this goal. And it all culminated this past Saturday, November 6th. A goal that he believed that he could accomplish. His team believed that he could accomplish. A lot of people saying that he was too small. When he gets into the ring with Callum Smith, he's going to find out what real power is like. When he gets into the ring with Billy Joe Saunders, it ends here. Too much, too fast, too strong. You're trying your hand at too much. Go back to 160. 3 years. 3 years of hate, of naysayers, of doubt, of critics, of getting chopped down. And he stayed focused. He set his sights on this vision and he saw it through to the end. And now he's a king at 168 pounds. That's a lesson for you, for me, and for the everyday person. Nothing to do with boxing. Put aside the hate. Set your goals on accomplishing and seeing your vision, your dreams through to the end, and just push through. Screw what everybody else has to say. Beautiful lesson down to the end. On the Caleb Plant side, what lesson can we walk away from Caleb Plant? Yes, the nerves, the doubt of everybody saying he's going to get beat, he's going to get knocked down from a moment that it got signed. And he stood up to the proverbial bully in Canelo. He stood up to him for 11 rounds until his body couldn't go anymore. But he gave it his all. And without a doubt, if Canelo ends up moving another division north, trying his hand at 175 because he doesn't think he'll come back down to 160, he's not happy with those weight cuts anymore. If he continues to move up or if he remains at 168, and which we hope he does and faces David Benavidez, he already cleaned out the division except for one. If he moves up north, David Benavidez is going to be left remaining. And maybe the Triple G fight. Triple G apparently is set to fight Ryota Murata in December to close out the year. And that's going to be for both of their titles to unify. So at 160, should that be successful, will Triple G end up moving up to 168 to fight Canelo and close out his career? Or will he try to do what Canelo just did at 160, which he should have been doing already years ago, going after Charlo and Boo Boo and all the other challengers there. Ryota Murata is the only other one, right? But then you got the up-and-comers like the Munguias, and you still got the English fighters, Callum Smith's younger brother, Anthony Fowler's out there, even though he lost to Liam Smith recently. But you got a lot of challenges out there. Charlo, Andrade, after Murata would be great for Golovkin should he be successful after defeating Murata, which I really feel he will. Great lessons that I walked away with. I ended up rewatching the fight before recording this. And so it took me a few days to do this recap because I really wanted to make sure that I did it justice. I hope I'm doing it justice. It's been a long journey getting to this point for Canelo Alvarez. And for Caleb Plant, 21-1 now. And the sky's the limit for Caleb Plant. Great boxer, represents and carries himself well. I would love to see him and possibly get proved wrong. I would love to see him against Billy Joe Saunders if that fight ever happens. Let Benavidez go against Canelo, fight Billy Joe Saunders. Since Callum Smith has since moved up to 175 and he's campaigning up there now, go after Billy Joe Saunders. I would like to see Caleb Plant and Danny Jacobs. That would be a great fight. Caleb Plant go after Osvari Morel. Or put an end to the hype of Edgar Berlanga. Those are PBC fighters. Well, Berlanga, I think, is with Top Rank. But sky's the limit for Caleb Plant. Without a doubt, he'll get his hand around another title. So, with that said, thank you guys again for tuning into the Tomatoita Show. I hope I did this historic fight justice. I did my best to do it for Josh Taylor, who was the last undisputed champ and the previous fighter to crown himself undisputed, and that was at 140 pounds earlier this year against Jose Ramirez. That was an amazing fight as well. Congratulations, Canelo. All hail King Canelo. He has cemented himself as the best at 168 pounds and the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world as we sit here today. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for all the love. Much love back to you. Talk to you on the next episode. Take care.